But before I start and introduce myself properly, I want you guys to do me a really quick favor. It's painless. I just want you to notice what your heart rate's doing, what your breathing's doing, and how sweaty, let's just stick with palms. Just notice, that's all I'm asking you to do. So by way of introduction, as I said, my name is EJ. I thought I would introduce the kind of different aspects of my life. So you have the professional me. I am an HR consultant. I am passionate about enabling managers and business leaders to be effective with regards to people and people management. I've set up my own business as an HR consultant, and I'm working primarily with business leaders and business owners who are in the SME space, so small to medium size enterprises. And I particularly specialize in recruitment and employee relations. Obviously, when you're setting up a new business, that's not stressful enough. So studying for a master's, a 5-year one no less, seemed like a good idea. So I am also in my 5th and hopefully final year of my Master of Science at Metanoia, at the Metanoia Institute. And I'm doing my psychotherapy as an MSc in psychotherapy. And in terms of clinical work, I see my clients in a low-cost community agency. So, oh, sorry, the personal me, my other me, sorry. I should obviously explain some of the pictures. I was, as you can see, when I was very little, a complete style queen. Things went downhill from then, but complete style queen. I am really easy to bribe. I have very strong morals. So basically, bribe me with Haribos and cake and coffee. Then I will be able to, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. I have 5 siblings. So if anybody gets tripped up on the maths, there's 6 kids in my family. I am both a middle child, woe is me, and I'm also an older child because we split out into 2 groups of 3. So I'm the oldest of the second set. And I am really keen on exercise, running in particular, yoga. I love hitting people. Technically, it's called boxing, but it's hitting people I really quite enjoy, which is not necessarily the thing to admit to in public, but it is totally true. So that hopefully gives you a tiny introduction about me. But more importantly, why am I here? Well, why am I here? Because I work in HR and do psychotherapy, and you guys work in the broadcast engineering space. More importantly, why am I here talking about change? And why is change such a big deal for us? Why is our response to change so significant? And in order to start addressing that question, I could come at it from 101 kind of different ways. I wanted to reflect on it from starting kind of from the perspective of what's the meaning of life, other than 42. And just to give you a heads up, I will be talking about emotions and feelings. I did tell you I'm doing psychotherapy, so it's kind of par for the course. So in order to kind of, as we start to get into this subject matter a little bit more, and to demonstrate what I'm talking about, I wanted to give you guys the heads up. I am going to be asking you to do something. It is relatively painless, but it will involve you getting into groups of 2s or 3s with people that you don't know. So if you've come with colleagues and friends, not them. And I'll be asking you to do something. It's a little sensitive, I admit. So this is a bit of a risk. It's a little sensitive, but the only touching that will happen will be of each other's faces. And the singing that's required will only be contained, well, will be contained within the groups of your 2s and 3s. So you don't need to move now, don't need to do anything right now, but I'm just letting you know it's coming. So, possibly not the cheeriest start to any talk that you're giving when one of the first items is about death, but hey-ho. But I wanted to start here because I get to talk about whatever I like, frankly, but joking aside, death, isolation, meaninglessness, which is actually really hard to say, and freedom are what in existential psychotherapy are referred to the four givens. And if you hear gibbons, then this is going to get very confusing. So givens with a V, just to be clear. And these givens, these four realities, are realities that we all face. There is no getting away from them. So whether we like it or not, we are at some point, hopefully not today and hopefully not anytime soon, but for some of us that might not be the case, but we are all going to die. Sorry. We come into this world on our own, and we leave this world on our own. And what is life about? Seriously, what is life about? Other than the meaning that we ascribe to it. And freedom seems like a slightly random thing to include on that kind of particularly perky, cheery list. It seems like a bit of an odd outlier. But freedom comes with its own challenges. Think about it. If you had no financial constraints or restraints, none whatsoever. Just think about that for a minute. My first response is like, shoes. But actually, if I literally could buy any amount of shoes that I wanted, or I could buy anything, that thing that starts off seemingly really great and really positive, I don't have to worry about money anymore, actually that becomes quite a burden. And in the context of these four givens, actually death doesn't just mean death as in dying death, but it also kind of talks to human limitation and the finiteness of this body, your bodies. Isolation leads into and is linked to our need for connectedness. We die alone, we're born alone and we die alone, but actually the whole human experience relies on us having connections. And if life is meaningless in and of itself, then the meaning, the narratives that we create are critically important. So part of my reason for starting here, other than to kind of slightly freak you out for my own personal entertainment, is to recognize the inherent challenges that life in general presents all of us. And these realities and the realities within the four givens are contrasted and sit alongside the fact that actually also as human beings, we crave safety and security. Homeostasis, and I know this is slightly ironic because I'm talking to our engineers, but homeostasis is our preferred state. Safety is about how safe I feel, whether I'm worrying about lions and, I don't know, axe murderers and things like that. That's a form of physical safety, but also safety in terms of relational safety. Do I feel safe in relation to you? Do you feel safe in relation to me? Yeah. So, and I start here because the reality of the context that you guys are living in and working in is that actually we lean into these because we're human. We lean into these four existential givens, which inherently refer to and require and mean change coming at us in all directions, whilst being humans who don't like it. Fundamentally, we do not like change. And so I guess I just wanted to set the scene and be kind of upfront about that. There's no getting away from the fact that we don't like change, but change is going to be happening to us and happening to us all the time. And so part of the reason for starting there is because if you're experiencing change, whether that's in your personal life or your professional life, whether you're doing the change to people, as it were, or change is being done to you, if your natural reaction is, I don't like it, it makes me feel bad, it makes me feel anxious, I'm not managing well with this change, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you may be going great, but you may also be going, this is great change, but it's also change and I'm anxious about it. So these two things can kind of sit alongside each other, and that's also very normal. But if your natural reaction and instinct is, I really don't like this, that just makes you human. Just makes you human. So I kind of wanted to introduce a framework that may help you think about it a little bit. So this next section, as we move into this next section, I wanted to give you some practical pointers, things to do. I appreciate this is a room full of engineers, so practical is preferred, I'm guessing. And I wanted to give you some tools that hopefully will, if they don't give you the whole answer, will kind of point you in the direction of places where you may like to go and look for more information. But before I do that, remember that exercise I said to you was coming? This is it. But before you start moving around, want to ask you something. When I was giving you that brief, what did you notice about your heart rate? What did you notice about your breathing? What did you notice about your levels of perspiration? I could see your body language, so there's no getting away from this reality, people. There's no getting away from it. And I'm interested in, you don't have to, I'm not asking for people to say out loud, but I'm asking you to notice what you did. What was your internal dialogue? Oh my word, it's somebody from HR getting us to do stupid shit again, pink and fluffy. Or was it more internally focused and focused towards yourself? Was it super critical? Now, just in case you didn't realize, I totally lied. You're not going to be singing. Definitely no touchy-touchy. I work in HR, people. Highly inappropriate. But what I did, and if anybody left the room, it's safe to come back in. but if any of those things shifted for you in terms of your breathing, your heart rate, how sweaty you got, if you left the room, if there were any changes to kind of when I first asked you to check what was going on for you at those times, that was all part of your threat response. And how you manage yourself when you feel threatened or unsafe is part of the natural response to change. And that will influence you in terms of how you lean into things when things are changing for you. And by asking you to check and notice what your body was doing, oftentimes our bodies are kind of like the pre-signal, the pre-indicator to give you the heads up that something is going on for you emotionally. So we register our emotions in our bodies first, sometimes before we realize, oh my word, I'm really anxious, I'm really nervous, in a slightly more cognitive sense. So leading on from that, and I should probably give you a heads up and an apology for those who are easily offended. There may be a couple of F-bombs dropped, but there's a point and a purpose to this. So in terms of managing yourself in the context of change, breathing probably seems like a really random place to start. But actually, when our threat responses are activated, when we don't feel safe, when we start to feel nervous and anxious, one of the things and you've probably heard of this, tip into is our fight, flight, freeze, fall over response. So your body's gearing up, physically you're gearing up to do something, to get out of this dangerous situation that you're in. And breathing helps to kind of de-escalate that. Now, you don't want that de-escalated if you're about to be chased by somebody wielding a knife or something, or you're in physical danger. But actually, if you're going into a conversation and you need to be relatively calm and you need to be thinking, you need to have that part of your brain that does your high-functioning thinking and reasoning switched on, which it's not if you're in your fight, flight, freeze, fall over response mode. So breathing both switches back on that part of your brain and de-escalates the fight, flight, freeze responses of your body. Mindfulness connects you into the present. I think when we're anxious and stressed out about something, we're often either stuck in the past or worrying about the future. The one place where we're not is in the here and now. And it widens in my mind, what I call the fuck it gap. And the fuck it gap is the gap between impulse and action. Impulse is, I feel anxious. Action is, therefore, I'm going to be really angry, or I'm going to eat that packet of crisps. That's obviously not autobiographical at all. Or I'm going to, so I feel something and I do something. If you widen that gap, you have opportunity to reflect on, oh, what am I doing? What am I feeling? And or what am I going to do about it? As opposed to just acting out before you've kind of clued into understanding and noticing why you're doing what you're doing. Movement, I mentioned at the beginning quite deliberately, I love my running and my yoga and boxing. and the hitting people. But one of the upsides and one of the important things with movement and exercise in general is that when we're tense, we go like this. That's not a very good place to be doing much from. But when I'm like this, when my shoulders are back, I'm elongated, I can breathe better, and then I'm starting to put myself physically in a position where I can, as I said, actually breathe, but then de-escalate some of my threat responses and make better decisions and choices. For those of you who kind of all a bit wigged out by that kind of stuff, coaching is another thing that I'm a great advocate of, particularly because it's a way of giving you an opportunity to really take stock of where you're at and what you're doing and why. And it gives you an opportunity to really see your own thoughts more clearly, as opposed to reacting from that, oh my word, something bad's happening and I'm really, really, really panicking and I'm not really thinking, but I'm really panicking. Actually, coaching helps to slow you down and helps you to have that thought process and notice stuff that's going on for you and helps you to reflect on it. Self-kindness and compassion. I asked you when I said about that exercise and getting into the groups and the singing and the touching, did you notice what your internal dialogue what was saying? And if you're anything like me, you gave yourself a bit of a kind of a kicking and were possibly highly critical of yourself. Actually, practicing self-kindness and compassion, which does, I appreciate, sound really pink and fluffy, is actually really important because I am my own worst critic. If anybody's going to be vicious, you can't out-viciousness me about me. You just can't do it. I'm too good at it. I've got skills, and that's definitely one of them. And obviously, as a psychotherapist, I'm a great advocate of therapy. I used to think that I was really normal until I went into therapy. And actually, I found out I am really normal, but I'm just much more aware of me and who I am and how I do relationships and how I show up in relationships. And that's not just kind of personal relationships, although it is also that, but it's also how I show up at work, how I show up here, how I'm standing here as a complete introvert and managing myself in this context. I appreciate I'm doing a real whistle-stop tour of all of this. I believe you're going to get copies of my slides, so please don't panic, particularly over these next few slides, because the countdown is ticking away here. So I am going to rush through these, but you will have these to refer back to. I wish I could claim that I invented this model, but I didn't. A guy called David Scarf, it's his change management model. But essentially, the principle and the thinking behind the model is when we're experiencing change, and if we are feel threatened by the change or think or consider this change to be a reward, then one or more of these elements are probably in play. So for those of you who have gone through or going through organizational change, if you think about what your reactions and responses were to the change, whether they were positive and or negative, the chances are one of these things, one of these elements were impacted. So if we consider the change to be, if we consider one or more of these elements to be a threat, then we are more likely to resist the change and or feel threatened by the change. And obviously, if we think the change is going to reward or benefit us, then we're more likely to lean into the change and consider it to be more positive. This is this slide I just did, and again, I won't go through it in masses of detail, but if you are doing change and managing people in a change context, this side is some of the things you might want to be, and when I say might, that's just me being polite. It's code for you really need to think about doing this stuff as you manage and plan for your change if you want to increase the likelihood of people kind of leaning positively towards the change and seeing the change as a reward. And if you're experiencing change and change is more kind of being done to you, these are the things that you may need to be thinking about. And again, I'm being polite in terms of kind of as you lean into the change, whatever's happening. So additional information and sources of help and support. Obviously, I don't have any of these. I totally have all of these. So a couple of apps. SoundCloud app is a really good place to download some and use some mindful.org mindfulness meditations, and the Headspace app, which is a commonly used and known one, I think. And the counselling directory, if you are interested in finding a therapist near you. And then the Nike Running Club and Nike Training Club apps are very good for guided runs and yoga and non-gym workouts, if that's your thing. And those 2 books are really great in terms of understanding mindfulness and doing it as well. So in conclusion, we have done a whistle-stop tour, and I appreciate it is a complete whistle-stop, in terms of change and why it's significant and how we might be responding to it and what we might do for ourselves in response to change. And I end with this quote, partly because it's my favorite quote of all times at the moment, but actually for me it really leans into change and why change is a challenge for us and how we might want to be in the context of change. And it is to say that the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. I appreciate we don't have time for any questions, so I'm going to be floating around, but thank you very much for your time and attention.
We've just got time for one. What's the burning question you'd like to ask? I shall ask it then.
So close.
Okay. I've committed myself to my job. I've given everything I have for years and years and years. Now I'm redundant. How do I carry on believing in myself?
You are not your job. You and your job are 2 very different things. And your worth as a human being and as a person is not linked to, in any way, shape or form, the role.
But it feels like that.
It does. No, it absolutely does. But I think the lesson I personally had to learn, and the conversations I've had when I've been making people redundant and supporting people through their redundancy is the more challenging it is when those 2 things are considered to be the same. When you can separate the 2 of them out, losing your job and being made redundant sucks. It might also be an amazing opportunity, but the chances are it also sucks. But actually, it doesn't have to tap into your sense of who you are and your worth as a person.
E.J. James from E.J. Consulting. Thank you very much indeed.